And hello everyone, welcome to another edition of 15 Minutes right here on KCTV. My guest today has been serving on the King County District Court bench for the last 20 years, the Honorable Judge Janet Garrow. Judge Garrow, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate you taking the time to be here. We know you're a busy person.
I'm happy to be here.
We are going to talk about a project that you have been involved in, but first let me just ask you a little bit about yourself. I know that you grew up in the Midwest in Wisconsin, and I also know that you grew up on a farm.
That's right.
What was life like growing up on a farm for you?
Growing up on a farm was actually wonderful.
What kind of farm was it, first of all?
It was a poultry farm.
All right.
And
So lots of chickens.
lots of chickens. We had, as one of my friends in college used to say, 15,000 chickens in 3 popular locations.
Oh, that's the more chickens, the more popular the location?
I guess.
And I would imagine, now I understand that you had a number of siblings that you grew up with as well.
That's right.
That's probably something that was required on a farm that size, I would imagine.
Well, back in those days, which are the 50s and 60s, it wasn't unusual for people to have large families on farms in Wisconsin. So we were kind of the norm at the time. Although today I see people with large families, and even for me, it catches my attention.
Mm-hmm. Because they're usually like this or doing something other than,
Right.
That's another subject. I would imagine that you had to perform some of your duties on the farm before school. Did you have to get up at the break of dawn and go out and work before school?
We did. We would get up and, feed and water the chickens and take care of them and go off to school on the school bus and then come home late in the day, and we'd have chores at the end of the day as well.
How late did you usually have to work in the evening time?
Typically on a weekday, we would work, probably up until 6 o'clock and then have dinner with our family, my family, and then we'd do our schoolwork and
homework.
Off to bed.
I know other people who grew up on a farm, and they point to that experience as something that really instilled in them a sense of hard work and time management. Did you receive the same influence from working on a farm?
Absolutely, because my folks were very instilled with the idea of everybody helps carry their weight, and it was not unusual for us to have assignment boards because there were so many of us, and to keep track of where people were and who was going to be working outside doing things with the animals and who would be inside helping my mom work on things in the house.
So your parents had to actually have job assignment boards for each of you to see what you were doing each day?
We did.
Okay. Did that help?
Well, it did, because you knew if someone else was supposed to be assisting you feeding the chickens, you knew who the assigned sibling was.
Did you have to gather a lot of the eggs as well?
There was a time when my folks were in the egg production business as well, and that particular building was not on our home place, so we would have to drive over there and collect the eggs and then bring them back, wash them, candle them, and grade them, and put them into egg cartons.
And then what happened to them? Ship them off to the sellers?
Then we'd take them off to the store.
Okay. White eggs, brown eggs, both?
White eggs.
Okay.
Yeah.
What makes a white egg from a brown egg?
I have no idea.
You don't?
It's probably something to do with the
chicken?
type of chicken.
Okay. Another topic for another show. You obtained your bachelor's degree from Purdue. You went Marquette. You obtained your bachelor's degree or your master's degree from Purdue. Mm-hmm. I would imagine that you were probably a pretty good student in high school. Did your parents instill the importance of education to you at a young age?
They did. Both of them went to college themselves. My father was a World War II vet, and he came back and he went to college at the University of Wisconsin on the GI Bill, and then he became a teacher, was his initial career. And my mother went to college in Oshkosh at the University of Wisconsin, what's now the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh, and she obtained a teaching degree.
Is school just something that you think maybe came naturally to you?
I think it did, because all of my other siblings were involved in it. I have 3 siblings that are older than I am, and I was just sort of the next sibling in line, and the hardest part was trying not to be compared to the older sibling.
Right.
And to try to at least do as well as they did. But yeah, I would say education was just sort of part of what was expected for all of us.
Sure, sure. You also are, I don't know, a lot of people didn't know this, but you're a musician. You played a lot of guitar and sang in coffee houses in college, is that right?
That's right.
Who were your influences growing up? Simon and Garfunkel, I would imagine, and who else?
Yeah, this was during the 70s when I was in college, and so Simon and Garfunkel were a couple of the artists. Joni Mitchell was one of the artists, Judy Collins, Joan Baez, mostly sort of folk songs that you could sing.
Right, and has had such a profound influence on today's music as well. You go back to the classics. Is that something you did with a band, or did you perform on your own, or both?
Usually I would perform with at least one other person. Sometimes I would perform by myself. So
You still play?
I play on occasion, not publicly, but for my own personal interest.
You have an acoustic, an electric, both?
It's an acoustic guitar.
Okay. When you, at some point you decided that you were going to go to law school, what caused you to make that decision?
Well, I had been at Purdue and obtained my master's in counseling and personnel, and then I worked for a year at the State University of New York in Cortland, New York, which is upstate New York. And I decided at that time I needed to make a decision of whether I was going to go on and get a PhD or whether or not I was going to do something different. And I'm a bit of a pragmatist, and so I decided that law was an area where I could work for myself or I could work with a group of people in a practice. And that was interesting to me, as well as being able to work with other people solving problems, because in my undergraduate degree in psychology and then in counseling, sort of working with people and problem solving was one of the things I enjoyed.
In high school or college, I would imagine that there were probably more than one person who had a great influence on you. Who would you say had the greatest influence on you as you were growing up, furthering your education? I'll put you on the spot
Yeah,
here.
that's kind of a tough question, because there were a number of people who influenced me. I think that I grew up and I was in Catholic parochial school, and I think that in terms of hard work and responsibility, the nuns certainly were quite an influence on me. And when I was in high school, I had an art teacher who was really easy to talk with about different issues. And she was an art teacher, she was actually more of a counselor to some of the students. And because of her style, I think that's sort of where I developed my budding interest in psychology and counseling.
Now, for those who have been to law school, usually the first year is always the toughest. The professors kind of break you down and reteach you how to think and analyze. Was your first year of law school, was it as tough as it was for all of us?
The first year of law school, no doubt, is tough. And I think even for the really bright students, it's tough, because it's a lot of hard work, it's a lot of reading, probably more reading than I had ever done in any of my coursework to date. And it really is a different way of thinking in terms of being able to analyze the situation, break it down into its component parts in terms of trying to problem solve.
Now, after law school, I believe that you went to work as a public defender, is that correct?
That's correct.
And is that something that you truly wanted to do, or is that the first job that came along, or why did you work as a public defender initially? The legal experience?
I worked as a public defender because when I was in law school, I received an internship working in a public defender's office.
Got it.
And I think that after my second year of school working there, you get a little addicted to the opportunity to work in the court system and actually appear in court. So that was my initial motivation.
After that, you had a number of positions. You worked for the city of Bellevue, both as a city attorney and in the planning department as well. So you've had some diverse work with the city of Bellevue. You then went to work for a major firm here in Seattle, in Cairn Cross Hempelman.
Correct.
Yeah. What did you do for them?
When I was at Cairn Cross, I worked in land use, mostly with private developers, and then my other area of practice was forest practices. So I worked with a major timber company and did a lot of roadway right-of-way use permits throughout the national forest, where because we're a land situation where you have sections of land that belong to the federal government and that is intermingled with private land, we would seek to get like a 200-foot right-of-way use permit to reach the private property.
Okay. How long were you at Cairn Cross for?
Just under 9 years.
At some point, you decided that you were going to throw your hat in the ring and run for judge. That means giving up a large part of your private life, raising money, all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
Having to run for re-election every 4 years. What inspired you to want to serve on the bench?
Well, I think it's a real honor to serve on the bench, and I really enjoyed the courtroom work. I also had the opportunity to have great mentor role models who were judges during that period of time.
Can you name one?
Brian Gain and
Judge
Joel
Brian
Rindle were two of the judges in Bellevue who I practiced in front of for a number of years.
You've been very active on the bench. One of the projects that you've been involved in is the Case Management System project. Did I get that correct?
You did.
You're essentially upgrading the court system, going to more of a paperless system. Tell me about what you've been doing with that project.
Well, we've been working on this project for a number of years, and really this is a significant project for our court. The King County District Court has been one of the leaders in using technology in its court system. And in 2005, we were one of the very first courts to go to creating electronic records. And we have hoped since 2005 to go on to the next phase, which was to have electronic filings so that attorneys, law enforcement, and other users of the court would be able to save the time in terms of not having to bring something down to the courthouse to file it, but to be able to do it from the convenience of their offices.
Now, at the Superior Court level, most of that has been done already, just not at the District Court level, which is where you're coming in.
Correct.
Now, I know some attorneys who might be a little resistant to going to paperless, not myself, but I know some attorneys that anything electronic, they get a little nervous. Can you promise all of us that this system is going to be as user-friendly as possible when it's implemented?
Well, we think it's going to be very user-friendly, and it's going to be word-based, so it should help in that regard because most people are using word-based products at this point. It's very easy in terms of a step-by-step application where people will put their things into what we call a portal, and we'll have directions about how to simply do that. It's going to be free, so you don't have to, when you register as a user for our e-filing, you won't be paying a fee to use the portal. If there's a filing fee associated with the case, you'll still, like you do today, have to pay those fees. So it should be, I think, quite user-friendly, and it'll save people an incredible amount of time.
Also, I would imagine a lot of paper.
A lot of paper.
Do you have any estimation about how much paper this system will save a year once it's implemented?
Well, we did some recent study on that, and we actually have found that right now with our electronic records, people file in paper, and then our clerks have to scan each of those pages into the electronic filing system. And we've figured out that on a yearly basis, we scan about 2.4 million pieces of paper.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a lot of trees.
Who else are you working on with this? I know that you're leading this effort. Are there other judges that are involved as well? Or
there are. Our presiding judge is Donna Tucker. Our past presiding judge is Corinna Harn, and she was also very much involved in the development phase of the project, helping select our vendor. Judge Art Chapman is involved with myself, along with Judge Elizabeth Stephenson, and we're sort of the core group who are working on helping develop the forms that the judges and others will use in the system, as well as the processes in terms of how the information will flow. And then we have a whole team in terms of our technical folks. Othniel is our Chief Administrative Officer, Othniel Palomino, and then we have an IT director, and we have about 4 or 5 analysts who are also working on the project.
What's your timeline? When is this project going to be formally implemented?
Well, we are phasing this project because we have to coordinate with the Administrative Office of the courts, and they are currently working on the Superior Court's case management system, trying to implement that in all of the counties in the state. And I think they're a little over halfway through that. So the courts of limited jurisdiction, which are the CLJs, which is my level of court.
That's the district court level. Is that
District
right?
and municipal
Okay.
court levels. So we are also in line for that, but King County decided it really couldn't wait for the state to complete its implementation. So what we're doing is we're phasing the system. We're first phasing in all the civil filings, then we're going to be going into the infractions and the criminal cases after that.
Very good. The Honorable Judge Janet Garrow, thank you for being with us today.
You're very welcome.
We appreciate it. It's good to see you.
All right, it's my pleasure. Nice to see you.
And thank you for joining us, everyone. Join us for another edition of 15 Minutes right here on KCTV. We'll see you soon.